We've all heard of antiques holding a piece of their past, a trace of the people who once owned them. But what if that trace isn't a warm memory? What if it's something colder, something that refused to be left behind? It's a recurring theme in the tales we collect, and it brings us to a new story. A story that begins in the chaotic, vibrant heart of Hong Kong, in a place where history and commerce collide, the open-air markets of Sheung Wan. For those who have been there, you know the atmosphere. The air is thick with the scent of dried herbs and aging paper, punctuated by the metallic tang of old brass. Sunlight struggles to pierce the dense canopy of tarps and awnings, casting the narrow alleys in a permanent twilight. This is where we find our next story, amongst the stalls piled high with curiosities, jade carvings, porcelain vases, and dusty furniture. A place where every item has a story, some more unsettling than others. Our witness, whom we'll call Mr. Chan, wasn't looking for a ghost story. He was a software engineer in his mid-30s, methodical and pragmatic. His passion wasn't for the paranormal, it was for the perfectly mechanical. Mr. Chan collected vintage cameras, a hobby that required patience and a keen eye for detail. On this particular Saturday, he was on a mission, hoping to find a rare pre-war model to complete his collection. As he sifted through a cluttered stall, an old camera caught his eye. It was beautiful, a heavy black brass body with intricate filigree. But there was a problem. The lens was completely shattered, its delicate glass shards glinting like scattered dust. An elderly woman, the stall owner, noticed his interest. Her smile was thin, almost secretive. "Don't worry about the lens," she said in a low, raspy voice. "It's a lucky piece. It captures things others can't see." Ignoring the strange comment and the broken glass, Mr. Chan was drawn to its unique feel in his hands. The camera was heavy, almost unnaturally so, as if filled with a hidden weight. He bought it for a pittance, a price so low it should have been a warning in itself. That evening, back in his high-rise apartment, he placed the camera on his desk. The modern, minimalist room felt suddenly still, and from the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a subtle flicker from the direction of the antique camera. The air was still, and a low click echoed in the silent apartment. He dismissed it, attributing it to the sounds of his old building settling. But as he settled in for the night, a quiet unease settled in with him. What he didn't know was that the camera he had brought home wasn't broken at all. It was just waiting for the right moment to open its shutter again. The story of the antique camera could be just another tale of a man with an overactive imagination. A common occurrence in a city as densely packed and noisy as Hong Kong. After all, the constant hum of a metropolis can make a person's mind play tricks. But our witness, whom we're calling Mr. Chan, was a man of logic and order. His world was one of code and data, a realm where every problem had a solution, and every solution could be debugged. He was an analyst, not an artist, and his home reflected this sensibility. His apartment, a sleek, modern space in a high-rise tower overlooking Victoria Harbor, was a testament to his life's philosophy. Clean lines, minimalist decor, and a breathtaking view. The only clutter was his collection of vintage cameras, each piece meticulously cleaned and cataloged. His wife, a talented graphic designer, would often tease him about his fascination with relics from the past. "You spend all day in the future," she would say. "Why do you fill our home with the past?" But Mr. Chan understood the beauty in these objects. Each camera was a perfect machine, a time capsule of engineering and design. His newest acquisition, the broken camera from the Sheung Wan market, was an anomaly. It was the only one in his collection that was not fully functional. It sat on his sleek wooden desk, a jarringly broken object in a room of perfect things. The following day, Mr. Chan's wife found him staring at the camera. "What's so special about that one?" she asked, her voice light with a hint of curiosity. "It's a rare model," he explained. "It's beautiful, even with a broken lens." He was speaking of its form, but he was thinking of the strange weight of it, the faint, lingering smell of old paper and dust that clung to it. He was a pragmatic man, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this piece was different. Something about it felt less like an object and more like a presence that was now in his home, observing him. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't a dramatic event. It was a subtle shift, a small, deniable change in the rhythm of his life. That evening, Mr. Chan was working late on a project. The rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the keyboard, the only sound in the quiet apartment. From the corner of his eye, he noticed the broken camera. The lens was still shattered, a spiderweb of cracks across the glass. But as he watched, a faint click emanated from it, a sound like a shutter being depressed. He paused, listening. The apartment was silent. It was probably just the old wood of the desk contracting in the cool night air. He dismissed it and returned to his work. But then it happened again. This time the click was louder, more distinct. It wasn't the sound of wood, it was the sound of a mechanical shutter. A small chill prickled the back of his neck, but he fought to remain rational. Old objects make noise, that's a fact. He got up and moved toward the camera. He picked it up and held it in his hands. It was cold to the touch, colder than the ambient temperature of the room. He ran his fingers over the broken lens and a shiver ran through him, an instinctive jolt of unease. Still, he convinced himself it was nothing. He put the camera back down, meticulously wiping his fingers on his trousers as if to erase the feeling. He worked for another hour, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer a peaceful quiet. It was the absence of sound, as if something was holding its breath, waiting. The clicking sound returned the next night, but this time it was more insistent. A rapid-fire series of clicks like a frantic heartbeat. Mr. Chan was in bed, the light from the street lights below painting a grid on the ceiling. He was on the verge of sleep when the noise began. Click, 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 click. It was coming from the living room, from his desk. He sat up, his heart pounding in his chest. His wife stirred beside him. "What's that noise?" she mumbled sleepily. "Nothing, just the wind," he lied, his eyes fixed on the door. He tried to tell himself it was just a coincidence, that old objects make noise, but the regularity of the sound, the almost desperate cadence, made it hard to believe. He got out of bed, careful not to wake his wife. The air in the hallway was noticeably colder than in the bedroom. He crept to the living room doorway and peered inside. The moon cast a pale glow through the window, illuminating the room in shades of gray. The camera was exactly where he had left it. There was no one there. But the clicking continued, a rapid, rhythmic stutter from the broken lens. As he watched, the small, ornate film advance lever on the side of the camera began to twitch ever so slightly, as if something was attempting to turn it. His heart hammered in his chest. A new detail had been added. The previous night, it was just sound. Now, there was movement. This wasn't a settling house. This was something else, entirely. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, frozen in place. A software engineer with no rational code to explain what he was witnessing. The third night brought a new, far more visceral sensory element. Mr. Chan was jolted awake by a sudden piercing shriek. It wasn't the sound of the camera. It was the sound of his daughter crying. He and his wife rushed to her room. Their young daughter was sitting bolt upright in her bed, pointing a trembling finger at the digital photo frame on her bedside table. The frame, a gift from Mr. Chan, was meant to display a rotating slideshow of happy family memories, birthdays, holidays, trips to the park. But now it was frozen on a single image. It was a picture of a woman with long jet black hair that obscured most of her face, save for a pale chin and a hint of a grim smile. She was standing in what appeared to be a dark, cluttered room. The image was grainy and distorted, but the unsettling feeling it evoked was crystal clear. His daughter was inconsolable, her small voice repeating, "The lady, the lady." His wife, seeing the fear in her daughter's eyes, quickly unplugged the frame. But Mr. Chan's mind was racing. How did that image get there? The frame was a closed system connected only to a USB drive of family photos. It was nowhere near the camera. As he led his daughter back to her room, he felt a sudden drop in the temperature of the air. A cold so deep it seemed to come from within the walls themselves. The smell of dust and decaying paper, the same scent he had smelled on the camera, now filled the hallway. Mr. Chan's orderly world was now crumbling around him. The subtle oddities of the past few days were no longer deniable. The crying child, the strange image, and the cold air were all signs pointing to one conclusion. He decided to find out for certain. The next day, while his wife and daughter were out, he retrieved the security camera footage from the previous night, a system he had installed for basic home security. He sat at his computer, his hands trembling slightly as he scrubbed through the hours of mundane footage. Most of it was uneventful, his wife coming in from the kitchen, him walking to the bedroom. Then it happened. At precisely the time his daughter had screamed, the video feed from the living room flickered. It wasn't a simple break in the feed. It was a momentary burst of static, a glitch that lasted for less than a second. But when the image returned, something was undeniably different. For a fraction of a second before the normal feed resumed, a figure was visible in the living room, a blurry, ghostly apparition of a woman with long black hair standing right in front of the antique camera on his desk. She was almost transparent, her form wavering like a heat haze, but there was no mistaking the shape. She was the woman from the photo frame. He rewound the footage again and again, watching the brief, terrifying appearance of the figure. The digital photo frame had not captured a photo. The apparition had created one. The undeniable evidence shattered his rational mind, replacing it with a cold, creeping dread. The hard evidence was all Mr. Chan needed. He knew he had to get rid of the camera, but he also knew he had to understand what it was. He spent the entire day searching for the market stall where he bought it. The elderly vendor was nowhere to be found. Frustrated and desperate, he approached a neighboring stall owner, a man who sold old Chinese scrolls and ink pots. He showed the man a photo of the camera on his phone. The old man's eyes widened with a flicker of recognition. "Ah," he said, his voice a low hum. "The soul collector's camera." The scroll vendor explained that the camera belonged to a woman who was an artist, a portraitist who specialized in capturing the essence of her subjects. He told Mr. Chan that her studio had burned down years ago, and she was among the many who perished in the blaze. But there was a local superstition about the artist. It was said that she was a believer in a forgotten form of spiritual photography, a practice that believed a piece of a person's soul could be captured on film. Her last uncompleted work was a series of portraits of the spirits of people who had died suddenly and tragically. The vendor claimed that the woman in her final moments had desperately tried to capture the souls of those trapped with her, including her own, on her last surviving camera. He said she was a soul collector, and that the camera was a vessel for the souls she had captured and the one she herself had become. The broken lens, he explained, was a sign of a violent transfer, a final attempt to capture a spirit that had shattered the object in the process.
The old man's revelation did little to calm Mr. Chan. Instead, it sent him spiraling into a deep paranoia. The rational world he had built his life on had been utterly dismantled. He now saw the camera not as an antique, but as a cage for a restless spirit. He was convinced that if he got rid of it, the ghost would simply follow him. He began to change his behavior, becoming withdrawn and obsessive. He would spend hours in the living room, watching the camera from a distance, terrified of what it might do next. He had heard about ghosts being tethered to objects, and he was convinced that the camera, having now made its presence known, would not be easily parted with. His wife noticed the change immediately. She tried to talk to him, but he would only speak in hushed, frantic tones about the presence in the house. He would tell her to keep their daughter away from the living room, creating an invisible line she was not to cross. He stopped working, spending his days researching rituals, folklore, and cleansing ceremonies, trying to find a way to safely remove the object from his life without setting its inhabitant free. The pragmatic software engineer had become a man ruled by a fear he couldn't debug. The story of the soul collector's camera taps into a powerful and pervasive belief in Hong Kong and much of East Asia. The idea that a person's spirit, if their death is sudden or violent, can become tethered to a physical object. This is not simply a fear of ghosts. It is a belief rooted in the very fabric of how spirits are understood to transition to the afterlife. In many traditions, a peaceful, dignified death is necessary for a spirit to find its way. A sudden traumatic end can leave a spirit disoriented, confused, and unable to move on. They become earthbound, bound to the place or, in this case, the object of their demise. The camera, as a tool for capturing moments, becomes the perfect vessel. It is believed that the very act of taking a photo can capture not just an image, but a piece of the soul of the subject. In the case of the artist, her last act was to try to capture the souls of those dying around her, and in doing so, she became trapped within the very vessel she used to capture others. This is a fear that goes beyond a simple jump scare. It's the fear of a spirit that is not malevolent, but simply lost. A spirit that is trying to complete a task it couldn't finish in life, eternally clicking its shutter in a desperate attempt to capture a world it can no longer be a part of. The camera is not a tool of evil, but a tool of eternal grief. So what do we make of Mr. Chan's story? On one hand, we have the account of a cursed object and a trapped soul, a ghost tethered to the last thing it touched. The camera, with its broken lens, acts as a sort of one-way mirror, allowing the spirit to see our world, but unable to leave it. The glitches in the CCTV and the strange photo are not glitches at all, but the spirit's desperate attempts to be seen, to be known, to be acknowledged. On the other hand, a more rational explanation exists. Mr. Chan was under stress. He was a man of order whose world had become chaotic. The strange noises could have been the sounds of an old object, a camera with a delicate mechanism, simply shifting. The photo on the digital frame could have been a random file corruption, a common issue in old tech. And the figure in the CCTV footage could have been a simple camera glitch, a temporary artifact of a malfunctioning system. His paranoia could be the result of a mind desperately trying to make sense of a series of coincidences. A man who, after hearing a spooky story, began to see ghosts where there were none. Ultimately, the truth, as always, is for you to decide. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia.